Stepping onto the porch, my mom pulled her suitcase behind her and said, "You're late." I glanced at the clock on my dashboard. 6:02 a.m., 2 minutes late, Mom. I replied with a forced smile. As I exited the car to help with the luggage, I spotted my sister, Lauren, exiting the house with her own suitcase. My smile froze. "What's happening?" I inquired, trying to sound steady. Mom turned with an overly cheerful expression. "Oh, Violet, we've decided Lauren should go instead of you. She's been really stressed and needs the trip." My heart tightened. Instead of me?
Mom.
I've been planning this for years. I paid for everything. She waved dismissively. "We appreciate it, dear, but you're always working hard. You can have another trip later. Lauren needs this now." Lauren didn't look guilty, just smirked, shifting her weight. "Thanks for understanding, sis," she said, her voice dripping with false gratitude. I stood there, heart pounding. My dad appeared, avoiding eye contact, handing me his suitcase. "This is unbelievable," I said, my voice shaking. "This was supposed to be our trip." "Well, it still is," Mom said with a smile. "Just with Lauren. Don't make a big deal out of it, Violet. Your sister really needs a break." My name's Violet, and for 2 years, I'd been working overtime to save every penny. Planning a trip my parents wouldn't forget. Flights, luxury hotels, guided tours. I arranged every detail, even down to the last dinner reservation. But standing in my parents' driveway, watching Lauren hop into the back seat of my car, a harsh reality hit me. No matter how hard I tried, in their eyes, Lauren would always come first. I clenched my jaw, biting back the sharp retort on my tongue. Instead, I forced a smile and said, "Let's get going." If they wanted to prioritize her, fine. They could go with her, but they wouldn't enjoy it. The drive to the airport was stiflingly quiet, except for Lauren's chatter. "Mom, did you see that TikTok on Paris? I can't wait to shop there. Will we have time, or will the tours take all day?" I gripped the steering wheel, forcing silence. Mom chuckled. "Of course, we'll have time. We'll see once there." I bit my cheek. "When we get there." They didn't even notice I wasn't part of that we anymore. Dad cleared his throat. "Thanks for driving, Violet. I know this feels odd." I looked at him in the mirror. "Unusual is an interesting way to put it, Dad." He didn't respond, shifting uncomfortably. Lauren leaned forward. "You're not mad, right? You're so generous. I could never afford this." I clenched my jaw, offering a tight smile. "Sure, Lauren, enjoy." At the airport drop-off, my patience wore thin. As I helped unload luggage, Mom hugged me. "Thanks for understanding. This means a lot to us and to Lauren." I nodded, stiffly. "Sure, Mom." Lauren beamed. "Thanks, Violet, you're the best," and wheeled her suitcase toward the entrance. Watching them disappear, my chest tightened with anger and hurt. The drive home was a blur, replaying each cutting conversation word in my mind. As I parked in my driveway, I sat gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. Without second thoughts, I marched inside, pulled out my laptop, and logged into every travel account I'd used. Hotel reservations, cancelled.
Tour refunded.
Airline upgrades, nope. As confirmation emails piled in, my chest eased. They wanted Lauren instead?
Fine.
But no 5-star hotels or private tours on my dime. Satisfaction settled as I closed my laptop. They'd explain themselves at the Paris hotel desk. I was done being a doormat. The calls started when their flight landed, my phone buzzing relentlessly as I unpacked the suitcase meant for a trip I no longer owned. The irony stung as I hung up dresses and neatly returned shoes to the shelf, the buzzing filling the room that I let out a sigh when my phone vibrated incessantly. Picking it up to see my mom's name flashing alongside numerous missed calls and texts. Unlocking the phone, I scrolled through the messages. "Violet, what's going on? The hotel says there is no reservation, and they won't let us check in. Call me immediately. This isn't a joke, Violet. Fix this now." A chuckle escaped my lips before I could stop it. Fix this? After everything they'd done, they thought I'd just swoop in to save the day? My phone buzzed once more, this time revealing a call from Lauren. I let it ring till it went to voicemail. Violet. This is so petty, she snapped, her voice filled with entitlement. We're stuck here because of you. Call the hotel and sort this out now. Rolling my eyes, I deleted her voicemail without bothering with the rest. I had been their fixer for so long, cleaning up mistakes and shouldering every burden. Not anymore. I eventually answered the phone to halt the flood of calls. Instantly, my mom's voice erupted, a torrent of anger. Violet, what have you done? The hotel says the reservation was canceled. And none of the tours are booked anymore. I let her vent before responding calmly. I canceled them, Mom. A stunned silence followed before she hissed. Why would you do that? Oh, I don't know. I replied sarcastically. Perhaps because you decided to take Lauren on my trip. Consider yourself lucky. I even drove you to the airport. We thought you'd understand, she shot back. Understand what? I retorted, voice rising. That years of saving and planning were nothing because Lauren needed a break? That my efforts meant nothing? Guess what, Mom, I don't understand, nor do I care to. I hung up before she could respond, finally tossing my phone onto the couch. Silence enveloped me, a blissful reprieve, a breath of fresh air. If they wanted to prioritize Lauren, then they could figure the rest out on their own. That serene silence didn't last. By the next day, my phone buzzed with messages again. Initially, I ignored them, choosing to tidy up the house and catch up on work. Still, curiosity got the better of me by evening. I braced myself for the avalanche of texts from my mom. Violet, you've gone too far. Your sister is in tears, and your father is furious. We can't get into any of the hotels you booked. From Lauren, you're acting like a child. Why make this a big deal? Fix it already. Then later. From my dad. We need to talk, this isn't right. I set the phone down, shaking my head. For years, I'd been the peacemaker, ensuring everyone else's happiness and comfort. They didn't know how to handle it now that I stepped back. After pouring myself tea, I sat at the kitchen table, allowing my simmering anger some space. How dare they expect me to clean up their mess? To paint me as the problem? Minutes went by before another call came, this time my mom's voice bursting out before I managed a word. Violet, this isn't funny anymore. We're stranded. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? I took a slow, deliberate sip of tea. Embarrassing? Try saving and planning for years, only to hear you're not even invited to the trip you funded? Stop being dramatic, she commanded. Lauren needed this more than you. Then let her figure it out. I responded crisply. You chose to take her instead of me. Fine. But don't expect me to bankroll her vacation. We're family, she insisted desperately. We don't treat each other like this. My bitter laugh cut through. Funny, I was just thinking the same. In the background, Lauren's voice filtered through, whining. Mom, hang up on her. She's being difficult. That was it for me. Enjoy your trip. Oh wait, you can't because it was mine. And now it's nobody's.
Goodbye.
I hung up, turning my phone off once more. That evening, a strange mix of anger and relief washed over me. Anger for them putting me in this position. Relief for finally standing firm. Call me dramatic all they liked. For once, I wasn't allowing them to take advantage of me. The next few days passed in blissful peace. My phone turned off. My mind clear without guilt trips or allegations. Morning coffees sipped on my porch became luxurious moments, afternoons dedicated to work, and small projects long neglected bubbled with fulfillment. On the third day, curiosity overcame me, and I turned my phone back on, uncovering more than a dozen voicemails stacking up. The initial ones from my mom, growing increasingly panicked. Violet, you need to call me back. This situation has spiraled out of control, and I am astonished at your actions, the message read. As your parents, we feel utterly humiliated by your behavior. How could you do this to us? Next were messages from Lauren, reflecting the same demanding tone she always had. This is incredibly petty, even for you, she wrote. You're destroying everything. Just fix it, Violet. And then came my dad's voice, softer, but just as sharp. Violet, he started, I cannot fathom what's got into you. Give us a call so we can sort this out. I hesitated before listening to my mother's final, lengthy voicemail, which was filled with frustration and fatigue. Violet, she began. We're back at the airport. The trip's a disaster. And I hope you're pleased with yourself. Your sister is heartbroken, and your father and I, well, disappointed doesn't even touch it. Call us when you're ready to converse. I deleted the voicemails without responding. I wasn't prepared to talk, and truthfully, I didn't know if I ever would be. This wasn't a singular mistake. It was an accumulation of years spent prioritizing Lauren and expecting me to smile through it. As hours ticked by, I reflected on countless moments of feeling overlooked or dismissed. Every holiday dictated by Lauren's whims. Every family event where my achievements were sidelined. This trip was merely the last straw, but the fractures had been forming for years. Later that evening, Grace dropped by unannounced, carrying 2 coffees and curiosity unmistakable in her expression. I heard something happened, she said, placing the coffees on the table. Your mom called me yesterday. Of course she did. My mom was always adept at rallying support when she wanted to pressure me into compliance. And I asked, sipping my drink. Grace shrugged, a wry smile spreading across her face. I told her you were probably busy and would reach out to her when you were ready. I chuckled, shaking my head. You're the best. No, you're the best, she replied. Her tone's suddenly serious because you finally stood up for yourself. I know how tough that is, Violet. Don't let them drag you back down. Her words lingered long after she left. Grace was right. I had spent too long twisting myself to accommodate people who didn't appreciate my efforts. It was time to end that cycle for good. By the weekend, I felt a new sense of clarity. The anger still simmered beneath the surface, but it was accompanied by a newfound feeling: freedom. Freedom from their never-ending expectations, from being the family fixer, to finally living by my rules. But the silence didn't last. Come Sunday afternoon, I chose to answer an incoming call. It was my dad. Violet, he began, his voice heavy with fatigue. Your mom wanted me to call, thinking you might listen to me. Continue, I urged, leaning back in my chair. He sighed deeply. This has all become chaotic. Your mom's upset, Lauren's furious, and well, it's just a mess. But you're above this. His words sent another wave of anger through me. Better than what, Dad? Defending myself, refusing to be trampled again? That's not what I meant. He interjected quickly. It's just that you've always been the sensible one, keeping everything together. This incident, it's unlike you. I laughed humorlessly. You're right. It's out of character, because I'm not contorting myself to tidy up your chaos anymore. He paused, and for a fleeting moment, I thought he might see my perspective. But then he said, You're penalizing the whole family over one decision. Is that truly fair? Fair? I echoed, my voice rising. Let's discuss fairness. Was it fair to discount me from the trip I organized, deeming me unimportant? Was it fair to swap me for Lauren, as if I didn't matter? That's not our intention, he defended himself. We just thought Lauren needed it more. Of course you did, I retorted. It's always about her needing more attention, more support, more of everything, while I'm expected to sacrifice for her. Not any longer. The silence from the other end was deafening. Finally, he admitted, I don't know what you want me to say. I don't need you to say anything, I replied, steady now. I just need you to understand I refuse to be an afterthought anymore. From now, I prioritize myself.
Goodbye, Dad.
I hung up, setting the phone down, my hands slightly trembling. Throughout the day, I allowed myself to feel everything: anger, sadness, relief. It was challenging, but it felt like the beginning of something new. I wasn't the family's fixer any longer, nor did I intend to be. They could learn to manage their chaos. When my parents and Lauren finally returned, I was parked in their driveway, coffee in hand, awaiting their arrival with an unexpected sense of calm as I watched their taxi pull up, with their suitcases trailing behind them. A mix of fatigue and irritation was written on their faces. Lauren was the first to break the silence. Well, I hope you're satisfied, Violet. I looked up, raising an eyebrow. Still seated on the porch swing, Pleased about what? I inquired. My mother waved her hand dismissively. Our trip, it was a complete disaster. We spent the whole week in rundown hotels, eating terrible food because we couldn't afford anything better, she continued. Lauren crossed her arms, chiming in, and don't get me started on the tours, or should I say, the lack of them. It was embarrassing to arrive and find no reservations for anything. I sipped my coffee, calmly absorbing their grievances. That sounds difficult, I replied. But remember, you wanted to take Lauren. That's not the issue, my mom said, her voice rising. You knew we couldn't afford everything you planned. You set us up for disappointment. Setting my mug down on the small table, I stood up. No, Mom, I didn't set you up. I worked for years to plan something special for us. You're the ones who excluded me last minute, I retorted. My dad finally spoke, his voice quieter but still accusing. You didn't need to cancel everything, Violet. That was drastic. Was it? I asked, arms crossed. Why should I fund a trip I wasn't invited to? If it was so crucial for Lauren, you should have organized it yourselves. Be grateful I didn't cancel your flight back home. Lauren rolled her eyes. You're being so dramatic. It was just money, Violet. And you're so entitled, I snapped, my patience wearing thin. Do you even know how much effort and sacrifice went into planning that trip? Or do you take for granted that things just happen because others make it so? They stood silent, momentarily stunned. I've been the responsible one for years, I continued with unwavering firmness. The one ensuring everything functioned smoothly while you took it for granted. My mom tried to interject. That's not fair, but I interrupted. No, Mom. What's not fair is how you've treated me. You chose to side with Lauren like always, so I decided to stop being your doormat. You didn't want me there, fine, but you don't get to benefit from my hard work without me. Grabbing my bag from the swing, I turned to leave. I'm glad you're back safe, but don't expect things to return to how they were. I'm done. Walking to my car, I heard their shouts, tinged with anger and guilt, but I didn't look back. Driving away from my parents' house, I felt an unusual sense of peace. Every visit for years had left me emotionally drained, but not this time. I felt lighter, having finally expressed what I'd held in for so long without worrying about their reaction. When I returned home, I made a cup of tea, sat on my couch, and replayed the confrontation. They had been convinced I'd surrender, as always, but seeing their shocked expressions as I walked away reminded me how much I've changed. Their anger or embarrassment didn't concern me anymore. I'd finished living my life to satisfy their expectations. The next day, Grace called. So, how did it go? She asked, skipping formalities. I laughed, leaning against the kitchen counter. Just as you'd imagine, they're furious. Lauren sulking, and Mom's likely scheming how to guilt-trip me back. Grace snorted. Let her try. You've grown a backbone, and I'll make sure it stays firm. I smiled, grateful for her steadfast support. Thanks, Grace, truly. You've been my rock. Anytime, she said softly. So, what's next now that you've quit playing the family fixer? Since the confrontation, that question had lingered in my mind. What now? For years, my energy went into pleasing my family, seeking their approval. Now that I'd let that go, the future felt boundless and slightly intimidating. I'm not sure yet, I admitted, but it feels good to decide for myself, not them or anyone else. Sounds like the start of something amazing, Grace said, and I could sense her smile through the phone. In the following weeks, I embraced small changes that felt significant in their own way. I redecorated my living room, replacing my parents' hand-me-down furniture with pieces that felt just right for me. I spent weekends exploring local cafes and parks, things I'd always meant to do, but hadn't prioritized. I also started journaling, writing my thoughts and dreams unfiltered by others' expectations. Each small step was like reclaiming a part of myself I didn't realize I'd lost. One evening, I sat down with my laptop intending to begin. Looking at the spreadsheet I had used to organize the journey, the canceled reservations glared at me. Yet, instead of feeling regret, a wave of determination washed over me. That money was intended for an unforgettable adventure, and I was determined not to waste it. Closing the spreadsheet, I opened a new browser tab and typed in solo travel ideas. Several weeks after my parents returned, I booked a solo trip to Italy. It wasn't the itinerary I had planned for them, and proving a point was no longer on my agenda. This was about me, about embracing my independence and prioritizing myself. Upon landing in Rome, a mix of excitement and nervousness enveloped me, as I had never traveled alone before. However, stepping out into the lively city, it became clear that this decision was the right one. I spent my days strolling along cobblestone paths, admiring ancient ruins and enjoying meals at delightful little cafes. There was no fixed schedule and no one else to consider, just me and the liberty to follow my desires. One afternoon, as I sat on the Spanish steps with a gelato in hand, I pulled out the journal I had brought along. For years, I had jotted down what I wanted to achieve, but those ambitions always seemed tied to pleasing someone else. This time, as I wrote, my focus shifted. Learn a new language, start a small business, travel to at least 5 more countries. The list expanded, with each item reflecting the life I aspired to create, not one that others expected me to lead. On my last night in Florence, I dined at a small, family-run restaurant overlooking the Arno River. As the sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, a profound sense of peace enveloped me. This trip was more than just a vacation. It was a pivotal moment. I had spent so much time seeking my family's approval, but here, thousands of miles away, I recognized something significant. I didn't need it. I was enough as I was. When I returned home, my parents reached out, their messages softer, more carefully worded. "Hope you had a nice trip," read a text from my mom. "Maybe we can all talk soon." I stared at the message for a moment before putting my phone down. I wasn't ready to reply, and that was okay. This time, it would be on my terms. As I unpacked souvenirs onto my shelves, a sense of pride surged within me. A week after my trip, my mom called. I answered, and her tone was unusually gentle. "Hi, Violet," she started. "How was your trip?" "It was amazing," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "That's good to hear," she said, pausing in search of the right words. "We've done a lot of thinking about what happened. Maybe we handled things poorly." The admission surprised me, but I wasn't ready to forgive easily. "Poorly? You replaced me on a trip I planned and paid for without even asking." "Poorly is an understatement." "I know," she said quietly. "Your dad and I didn't realize how much it would hurt you." "And Lauren?" I asked. "Does she also feel bad, or does she still blame me for ruining her vacation?" "She's upset," my mom admitted, "but I think she knows she could have handled things better." I sighed, leaning against the counter. "Mom, this wasn't just about the trip. It's about years of putting her first and expecting me to pick up the slack. I'm not doing it anymore." "I understand," she said after a moment. "We want to do better. We don't want to lose you." Her words tugged at something deep inside me, but I had learned not to let guilt dictate my decisions. "I'm glad to hear that," I said, "but it'll take more than words to fix this. I need to see real effort, not just apologies." "You will," she promised. "We'll give you the space you need, but I hope you'll let us back in someday." After the call, I felt a mix of relief that they acknowledged their behavior and skepticism about their actual willingness to change. But as I wrote in my journal that evening, I realized something crucial. Whether they changed wasn't my responsibility. In the following months, I maintained my boundaries. I responded to their calls and messages when I felt like it, avoiding any inclination to mend things or ease conflicts. Instead, I focused on creating the life I desired. I enrolled in a photography class, a long-held dream I never had the time or energy to pursue. I joined a local hiking group and started planning my next solo adventure. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Sitting on my porch one evening, watching the sunset, I realized how far I had come. I was no longer the person who bent over backward for those who didn't appreciate me. I was someone who valued herself, who set boundaries, and who wasn't afraid to stand up for what she deserved. I felt truly free.